That's the thing that builds legacies. It's the day-to-day, consistent application of your passion. Hi, and welcome to Helping You Perform. I'm your host, Paul Teasdale. Over a career working with high-performing teams from across the globe, including 7 years working with Formula One team McLaren, I've learned a lot about what it takes to drive results. In this weekly podcast series, I'm going to be bringing you tips, tricks, and insights from the world of Formula One that you can apply for your organisation for your own high performance. Enjoy. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Helping You Perform, where I bring my tips, tricks, insights and stories from the world of Formula One and beyond to help you apply those lessons for yourself and accelerate your own performance. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode, which is episode number 52, which raised the question of what is high performance? Very easy question to ask, not so easy one to answer, but I do encourage you to go back and have a listen to that and have a think about that for yourself. What does high performance mean to you, to your team, and to your organisation? In this week's episode, I'm going to follow on from episode 51, where I talked about grief and performance. This is something very personal to me at the moment. Those of you who know me know I'm going through some family bereavement, and I'm using this as an opportunity to reflect and to learn and to think about these elements that sit around performance, sit around my world, but also sit around the people who I've known, loved, and grown up with. And see what lessons I can take so that we can move forward. And that's what today's episode is all about. It's about legacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal story, but I'm going to start off just reflecting on a couple of legacy stories from the world of F1. And the two people who really stood out to me from the world of McLaren in particular, where I worked, was first and foremost Bruce McLaren. So the person whose name is literally synonymous with the team itself. And secondly was Ron Dennis. So Bruce McLaren was the originator of the McLaren racing team. He was a Kiwi who was just passionate about racing. From an early age, he showed very high skills and high endeavour for actually taking things, and particularly taking a car and giving it the performance that nobody else thought it could get, and trying new things and working with people to really challenge those boundaries and do something new. And he was all about, whether he meant to or not, he was all about leaving a legacy of building this team, building this way of working, this ethos of challenging the boundaries and doing something different. There's a great story of one of the races he was in where his car wasn't doing too well, and he realized that what was happening was there was a problem with the air intake, and he actually stopped in the pits, got out some snippers, some sort of metal snippers himself, and cut out some of the bonnet to the car to allow more air to flow in and to cool the engine down. And that got him such high performance, I believe he ended up winning that race. But it's that sort of attitude of, I can see a problem, I know that it can be solved, and I'm just going to try something, I'm going to fix it, and then I'm going to push that performance boundary to the next level. And that's a legacy that he has left behind him. And second person I mentioned was Ron Dennis. So Ron took over the McLaren team in the 80s and built it into this sort of superpower of racing that it was, and still is to this day. And it's all because of the efforts that he put in and the passion and commitment that he put into building that team, to building the McLaren Technology Centre, which I don't believe anybody else would have had the guts to put together such an amazing facility. So someone who just put so much passion into the perfectionism of McLaren that he left that legacy of performance and of always striving for the very, very best in anything that was going forward. You know, there were all sorts of stories about Ron Dennis. I only had the chance to meet him on a couple of occasions in person, but his aura around him, and one of the stories that always stuck with me was, you know, the whole place at McLaren Technology Centre is immaculate, and he would see that a certain tile was a slightly different grey to the others, and as soon as he noticed that this wasn't in place, it wasn't right, he would immediately say, right, that needs to be fixed. And I don't mean tomorrow or next week. It needs to be fixed right now, because that isn't the perfection that I'm after. And so having that attitude of perfectionism is a legacy that he's left behind him in the world of McLaren. Now, on a personal level, I was at my dad's funeral earlier this week, and one of the things that struck me was the legacy that he's left behind. My dad was an educator, started off as a teacher, went sixth form colleges, but eventually found his way into the world of maritime, and particularly of maritime engineering and sort of the apprentice side of that, and building up a college for people to learn how to be apprentices in the maritime industry. And he helped set this up from scratch. And he built a legacy of something that had a real impact above and beyond just the people right in front of him. It impacted the community. It impacted Liverpool and the Merseyside region as a whole. And but most of all, the stories that I heard over the last few weeks, where I've been talking to people either at his funeral or beforehand, which have all been just, it's a sad time for everybody, but I'm just taking such joy in sharing the stories of the lives that he touched. And that was the legacy that really came through for everyone, is although he'd built this thing, which has gone on, this Mersey Maritime sort of engineering school, which has gone on to bigger and better things, which is always what anybody who's building a legacy is all about. So that's setting something up so we can get even bigger and even better. But the legacy that stuck with me are the individual stories and how he went about doing that. And what really came through for me was the approach to just caring for people and listening to their story. No matter who he was talking to, there were stories from his window cleaner, a young guy who moved, saw that this new build of a few houses where Dad had just moved into, sort of knocking on the door and saying, "Can I come and clean your windows? Can I get the business here?" And before the guy had left the house, Dad had sat him down, asked him about what his business was all about, what his life was there for, what did he want to achieve. And by the end of it, he'd built him up a business and also got him the business of all of the sort of 10 or so houses in this little estate that had been built as well. And that was what the legacy was for me. It's the ability to listen to individual stories, to say, right, what is it that I can add to this? Even if it's just a few questions, a bit of a challenge, listening to what you're trying to do, and maybe adding a couple of connections in play. And that could just be your neighbours. You want my business? I'll give you my business and my neighbour. See if my neighbours want the business as well. But this also happened with all the apprentices he worked for, the individuals, his gardener, people who were there, who were just having these amazing conversations of leaving this legacy behind of, by having caring conversations with people, you can impact so much more than just your own life. You can have this wave effect and ripple effect beyond yours and out into others, who then go and ripple that out to others beyond themselves as well. And so this is a big question for me at the moment. I'm going through this, which is, what do I want my legacy to be? But also, how do you go about building that legacy? And I think the lesson on reflection, when I think about Bruce McLaren, when I think about Ron Dennis, and when I think about Jim Teasdale, I think about people who were passionate about the thing in front of them right there. How do you get the best out of that moment in front of you, out of that individual in front of you? And from that will naturally come the legacy, because you care so much, because that is felt by others, and because that has an impact on their lives. And so when thinking about legacy from my perspective, it's about, how do I want to build on what legacy has been left before me? And what do I want to leave behind? But also, how do I want to do it? How do I want to be remembered? Because I don't really mind in my own way whether or not I leave a thing behind, or a big business, or a big sort of institution or organization. But actually, the legacy for me through all of those people is the fact that they've touched the lives of others and had an impact so that they become better versions of themselves. And so that for me is what legacy is all about. We can learn a lot from the world of F1, and we can learn a lot from the people around us as well. So have a think about that for yourself. What does legacy mean to you? And what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to look back at your funeral, if that's too morbid for you, if later on in life when they're having those stories, what do people want to reflect back and say, that's what he was all about, or that's what she always did, therefore that had an impact on my life? And I want you to think about that for yourself and think about what you can do to start building those things into your day-to-day operation as well. Because that's the thing that builds legacies. It's the day-to-day consistent application of your passion. So think about your own legacy. I'm going to be thinking about mine. And I'd love to hear from you, hear what you think, your thoughts are, and hear where you want your legacy to be and how you want to build that legacy. And if you want some help, as always, give me a shout. Go to paulteasdale.co.uk. Let's set up a free 30-minute chat, and we'll talk about our own legacies. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Helping You Perform podcast. If you found value in this episode, please take a moment to like, share, or review the podcast. You can reach out to me at any time, either through LinkedIn or through my website at www.paulteasdale.co.uk. I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode.